Greetings to you all fellow travelers. This is Grotnip, finally welcoming you all back to the logbook of a simple Lindworm traveler. I have been away from this far too long, and for that I am truly and thoroughly sorry. I have been extremely busy and tired of late, and that has left little time for me to indulge on doing Warcrow videos, but I have been trying to work my way up to this point for a while now, and I have some nice episodes coming up as soon as I can find the time to record them. But today I am extremely excited to get to talk to you about the Northern Tribes profile updates in the last batch of updates that came with the Rules 1.6 document. I know it's been a week since these profiles came out, but I was suspecting that we would see some corrections, and I was expecting an FAQ document. So I have put off releasing this episode for a while now, but I feel now is the time where electricity and analytical precision meet each other halfway, and we can talk about all the exciting changes to our beloved Northern Tribes. So what are we going to be doing here today? With the Warcrow Rules Update 1.6, we got a massive amount of profile card updates, and pretty much every single unit in the Northern Tribes faction, save maybe a couple, got looked at. For many of these profiles, these units, the changes were cosmetic. There were some clarifications on the language of some abilities that we already more or less knew how they were supposed to work, and the new Dauntless descriptive was added to the mostly passive skills that were supposed to maintain their effect while the unit is also fleeing. But there were quite many changes that actually affect the gameplay potential of our beloved Northern Tribes units. So today I'm going to be doing my best to try and work through the list the best that I was able to discern and see what changes have been made and what effects these changes might have. Shout out to Alejandro and all the other good people in the Northern Tribes section of the Warcrow Discord server. There has been a lot of discussion on the changes there, and I have been able to pick some of the ones that I missed from their discussions and added them here. Most recently, the skin changer change for when the totem is supposed to be selected. This video is a compromise between trying to release as quickly as possible after the update and trying to have had enough time to see how the cards landed with Corvuspelli releasing some minor hotfixes and stuff. We still don't have a FAQ. That's something I have been looking forward to before doing this, but now I think it's time to just forge ahead, mistakes and all. Please keep this in mind if and when you look at this video and you spot something I missed, or you come back later to see that FAQ or a later update invalidated something that I was talking about. Without further ado, let's get going. The first profile to be talked about on this presentation is obviously going to be Alborg, who got pretty much the full rockstar treatment in the profile update coming along with the 1.6 rules package. Firstly, it cannot be overstated how important it is that Alborg got a decent discount on his points cost. Now the charismatic leader of the northern tribes only costs 40 points, which makes including him in a company so much more easier. Now he costs the same as a mounted Wrathmane, and that means that a lot of people should be able to slot him rather easily to the lists that they were already running. Then again, the fact that he does bring War Alliance and the Warg and the Crow means that you probably want to alter your list a bit anyway. A second nice change to Aalborg concerns his conquest value. I was always a little bit befuddled by the fact that the supreme commander of the Northern Tribes faction does not have a conquest value on their own, nor does he add any to a unit that he joins, and this felt clearly like an oversight, and it seems to have been just that, because now Aalborg has a single point of conquest when fighting solo, and when joining a unit he adds that all important +1. Yes, your Northern Tribes units are mostly base conquest value 1, and some even deteriorate to 0 once they take enough casualties, so you aren't going to be winning one-on-one conquest offs with most enemies. But that conquest 2 on the unit Aalborg is leading still is going to help a lot when you are piling several units and applying or commander from the contender and so forth and so forth. So really welcome change there. Lastly, a extremely impactful and extremely exciting a change. The Warg and the Crow, the signature command skill of Aalborg, has changed. Now it no longer grants the Northern Tribes player a half an activation by activating a unit to perform a simple action, but now it grants a full-fledged activation to a Varang or Orc unit, depending on what unit is used to proc this command skill. And this is freaking amazing. I have a battle report in the works where I got to run this ability for the first time, and getting to perform 2 full activations once per round as the Northern Tribes player feels so awesome. You can do so much more with a full activation than the half one you had to work with previously. Yes, the value proposition for some units has changed for a side grade rather than upgrade when it comes to this one. There were some rare situations where you'd be willing to only take that simple action so that you don't incur the stress or the activation token that comes usually with a full-fledged activation, but I'm not going to be missing that part of this command skill, I can assure you that. Now you can, for example, activate your Evoker first to advance them, have them cast, let's say, Spirit of the Thermapleurus on a unit of maybe our usual favorite is the Tundra Marauders, and then you get to activate the Tundra Marauders for a move and Snow Leopard Tattoo so that you can start terrorizing your enemies. So stuff like this has become way more easier. Scenario plays, adventure plays, in general that can make use of dual activations and simply ganging up on units or hitting 2 units at different spots on the table at the same time. These are all the types of things you can do now with even more gusto with the far improved the Warg and the Crow. So I would go as far as to say that going forward Aalborg is the high command to beat when it comes to building a Northern Tribes list. If you have absolutely no set reason to run one of the other high commands, I think you should probably be going for Aalborg. The Warg and the Crow alone is so powerful in our activation, in our faction with limited extra activations. Getting to access those via Alborg is great, and he's a good fighter on his own, if not stellar. He did not get a weaker offensive profile like his compatriot did with his to go along with his reduced points cost, so there's still that, and now he is even better as a squad leader than he previously was, thanks to that +1 conquest. So I'm looking forward to running Alborg in most of my lists going forward. Next up is the model that has probably had the most interesting journey when it comes to how they are perceived during their time in the game, at least in the Northern Tribes faction, and that is the Evoker. When the game was first released, Evoker quickly found herself in pretty tough a spot. She was obviously the weaker spellcaster in the Winds from the North box, and as time went on and other more powerful spellcasters came along, the Evoker seemed to be left behind quite badly. Then again, there were those visionary Northern Tribes players who realized sooner rather than later than which was the case with me, the realizing later that you could actually do terrible things with a fully augmented old version of the spirit of the Thermapleurus and some maneuverable units. So towards the end of the 1.5.2 era, Evoker scare tactics had become a mainstay of competitive Northern Tribes lists, at least a subcategory of lists. But at the same time, using her just for that and leveraging just a tactic of trying to scare your enemies off the table while they haven't had the time to unpack their forces from their deployment zone felt a little bit icky and not maybe what the game's designers had in mind. So, with this preamble aside, I'm really excited to tell you that the Evoker went through a substantial change when it comes to their spell performance and their command skill performance in the 1.6 update. Firstly, the Evoker got a bit of a nerf. Her willpower was reduced to a double orange, and this seems to be in line with a larger change where the willpower of the spellcasters has been brought down a bit. Double orange seems to be the happy medium for spellcasters, or the most common value out there, and I can see why. The double orange willpower will mostly get the spell off with the help of the automatic success from Tinge, but at the same time it leaves a chance for spell block attempts, so spellcasters can try and provide value by blocking spells against double orange willpower too. It's not usually worth it, at least in my opinion, to try and block spells against those orange and red or yellow and red rolling enemies, especially if Scions of Yaldabaoth are the ones casting the spell, because they will push the spell through usually no matter what, and they don't mind the tinge either. But back to the Evoker. Delegate of the Ancestors, the command skill of the Evoker has been changed. The range has been slightly reduced from 20 strides to 18, which is okay, we can live with that. But the big thing is that the ability is also applicable to Varang units now. And this is just a type of change that I love to see. The Varangs have been the red-haired stepchildren of the Northern Tribes faction so far, so demolishing some of those things that kept them as the weaker option really goes a long way towards making them more appealing when building lists. And now the evoker can manage the stress of the Tundra Marauder, Skin Changers, and your other Varang units, and also, more crucially, she can automatically rally them if they break, and thus return them to the fray. So I really like this change. The Evoker's spells also went through pretty much a total reimagining. Spirit of the Thermopleurus now always grants Intimidating 2. The range has been reduced from 20 to 18 strides to be in line with Delegate of the Ancestors. And the alterations have changed also. Now you have a black alteration that causes any unit charged by the unit enhanced by Spirit of the Thermopleurus to suffer the frightened state, which means that they will be more likely to suffer stress or potentially even break when the scary Northern Tribes unit comes calling. With another black alteration, the enemy can be forced to break if they don't get any successes on their willpower roll to resist the effects of intimidating. And I really like this change. Breaking the enemy automatically if they didn't get all the successes required of them was really harsh. Even the units with the highest willpower in the game, we're talking double oranges or even red yellows and your orange yellows, had rather substantial chances of failing that test and demoralizing and fleeing immediately, and that didn't feel alright, especially when you were subjecting the enemy units to these all important willpower checks while they were still at their deployment zone. But now I think this is more in line on what we want to see in the game. If you don't get any successes, you break automatically via this alteration, and that introduces risk to your opponent's plans. They are unlikely to fail to get any, but what if they do? And that's something they have to now still plan around, but it's not something that will haunt their dreams at night, as it has in some cases done previously. Lastly, there is an entirely new alteration, one that grants the spell an interesting damage dealing effect. With this alteration, when the unit with the Spirit of the Thermopleurus wins a combat, the enemy suffers automatic wounds for each point of stress that equals or exceeds their morale value. So if you put your enemy full on stress, you will cause an automatic wound with this one if you win a combat against them, and if you put them 2 or 3 over, then they are looking at extra wounds via that. This is really cool, a change. It really, I feel, leans on the feel of the Northern Tribes being the apex damage dealers in the game, and even their scare spell is capable of reinforcing their damage dealing tendencies. This also means that the Spirit of the Thermopleurus is not a either-or spell like it used to be. It could be absolutely freaking terrifying, pun intended, against enemies that were not immune to effects of intimidating, but then again, fearless units, golems, and so forth simply couldn't care less about this spell's effects. But now even a fearless unit, even a golem unit, even a manned unit, they still have to be mindful of the fact that if they get hit by an enemy unit that's decked out with the Spirit of Thermopleurus with this particular alteration, that's gonna hurt some extra, and that is really cool game design, and I'm here for it. Last important change when it comes to the Evoker is that their Summon Rock spell got massively improved. The base range of the spell has been increased to 12 strides, and there is now an alteration that can take that range up to whopping 18 strides. Even though the Evoker is quite slow a piece, this does give her a substantial potential threat range with this magical missile. The spell's attack roll was also upgraded into a red and triple orange, and there is a built-in switch that allows the evoker to cancel enemy blocks with each of their special symbols that they roll, so that's quite powerful in and of itself. In addition to this, there is another alteration that turns hollow successes into automatic wounds, even further increasing the amount of potential damage out there. And lastly, the old version's area of effect pulse slow that remains in play has been kept. So now the Northern Tribes faction has access to some pretty terrifying arcane artillery with still the familiar slowing effect. I did some basic calculations on the Summon Rock, and the average damage of this spell now is around 5, and the maximum is at 8. So that's that's quite some hefty ranged damage output for the tribes, and this is a way of getting that little bit of ranged oomph into your list without actually shelling out the points for investing in a traditional ranged attack element. So again, something that I really like. As befits a real rational balance patch, not every updated profile can get better, and one of the profiles that had to get weaker for the benefit of the overall picture is the Venerable Wise Mane. The Wise Man got one good thing out of this update, and that is that his solo defensive performance got upgraded slightly. He got another blue dice on his defense roll, and while this isn't probably going to come up a whole lot, and when it comes up, it's probably not going to be the thing that determines the result of an interaction, it's still a cool thing to have. I was always a little bit bugged by how absolutely abysmal the defense roll of the Wise Man was, and bringing it more in line with his compatriots feels appropriate. Unfortunately for the Wise Man, that's where the good stuff stops. The joint profile kept its plus yellow dice on willpower and plus on morale, and it still makes the unit the Wise Man is attached to fearless and grants them the ability to reroll their willpower rolls, but everything else is pretty much downhill from here. The Wise Man no longer provides any automatic offensive or defensive performance on their unit. It's just the push modifiers that you are working with. The Wise Man also lost his ability to increase the conquest value of the unit that he has joined, and he no longer adds any switches to the unit that he is fighting with. The general rules update also weakened the Voice of Experience command skill, because now command skills can only be triggered once per trigger timing. So this effectively means that the Wise Man can only ever fix a single die per roll, so gone are the days of fixing two dice for double successes slash successes and blocks in order to punch way above the wise main's point bracket. I feel that these changes are harsh, but they are deserved. The wise main was a 25-point model at least with his previous abilities. You were just paying 15 points for the whole package. Now supports are also counted as members of their unit, which even further highlights the need to scale back some of the amazing buffs that the wise main is capable of providing. The Wrath main got a small, or rather two small changes. Firstly, he got a point of conquest when fighting solo, which is in line with the update to Aalborg, and it also a little bit reinforces this feeling of a band of heroes fighting to overpower the enemy and take ground from them. So that's nice. It's not going to be game breaking by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a nice thing to have. Unfortunately, Wrath Roar got a little bit of a nerf. It now requires line of sight, which used not to be the case, so you need to lock eyes with whatever you are shouting so that you can disarm and frighten them. This change makes sense, but still it hurts a bit. This exact same thing also happened to the Mountain Wrath main. I don't have a slide on him since that's the only change that I can see, but that is still something to keep in mind. Oh yes, Nord the Merciless, or from now on Nord the even more merciless. Njord was in a bit of a rough spot before the 1.6 update. No one could deny his excellent solo fighting capabilities, but unfortunately his combat prowess is overshadowed by the Revenant, who actually comes in at exactly the same points cost. This leaves the onus on the joint version of Njord to somehow entice the Northern Tribes player to pick him instead. And while Berserker Rage is still, I think, one of the best abilities, best keywords for a unit in this game to have, having that is not enough because Hersir already brings Berserker Rage, and in addition he brings additional switches and abilities. So Njord with his switchless conquest value, modifierless profile as a joint option didn't feel worthwhile, especially when the 40-point tag was concerned. Njord, however, has always had an interesting ace in the hole, in that he's one of the few models that is capable of potentially activating forever, because his merciless passive on the solo card profile part allows him to reduce his own stress when he's dealing damage. Now CB has made the excellent targeted single change to Not the Merciless by also allowing the joint version's Merciless to be full copy of the solo version's one. So now when you are attaching Nord to a unit, you are getting a unit that reduces its stress every time it inflicts damage upon its enemies. And in a faction like Northern Tribes, you are usually going to be dealing damage to your enemy. So now it's so nice to feel that I am excited to try out Njord in various combinations going forward. There are some great Varank options out there to test out now. I think he should do rather fine both in Tundra Marauders and in the skin changers for different reasons, obviously, but still. But if and when a war alliance is on the table, then having him attach into a unit of battle scarred or a unit of orc hunters could be really cool too. So looking forward to testing those possibilities out. Speaking of the skin changers, let's talk about the Northern Tribes unit that got the biggest buff out of them all. These buffs are massive, and at the same time they are so warranted. The skin changers as a unit, as models, when it comes to their backstory, they are one of the coolest things in the Northern Tribes faction, but for the longest time they were by far the worst non-character unit, worst non-high command unit in the entire faction. And while I played them from time to time and I desperately wanted to make them work, they were really hampered by the fact that yes, under the right circumstances with the right support they could hit tremendously hard, but that was all they did. They hit hard, usually once, at maximum twice, and then they folded like paper. And having an expensive two-member unit do that, just get obliterated once the enemy gives any meaningful attention to them, was just unacceptable. At the same time, the skin changers were suffering from total lack of innate conquest value, which made them essentially useless when it came to even moderate scenario plays. But all those problems are in the rear view mirrors, I am happy to report. First change that the skin changers have undergone is the fact that they have gotten a new passive skill called Predator's Vigor. And what Predator's Vigor does is that it allows the skin changers to ignore a point of damage they would suffer in a combat as long as they had at least one success on the roll that resulted in that damage. So essentially this is Varang scars for the skin changers. As long as they are hitting the enemy, they will be taking a point of reduced damage in turn. And as you can see, and as most of you already knew, the skin changers not only have a excellent offensive profile, but they also have a push modifier on their defense that hits back with an automatic success and a red dice. So you should be essentially triggering this every time that the skin changers are brawling in melee. Do remember, however, that getting shot at will shut down this ability because you won't be able to leverage your offensive dice nor your offensive symbols when defending against ranged attacks and such nonsense. The second big change that the skin changers went through is their defense roll, which got decidedly better. The full strength profile, which, let's face it, is the one you should be using always because you are joining an officer to this unit surely, got a full green dice added to it. So now you are rolling a green dice, a blue dice, two black dice, and then you are adding whatever you get from your officer, and then you get Predator's Vigor on top of that. And this means that the effective melee defense roll from the skin changers went up from average 1 maximum 3 to average 3 maximum 6, and that's a massive difference. This also means that the skin changers should be more frequently able to access their defensive switch that allows them to turn blocks into successes. This is yet another way to trigger Predator's Vigor if you are not hitting back in any other way, so keep that one in mind. And it also opens up more possibilities for the Northern Tribes player to assert agency, assert domination in a melee combat involving the skin changers. When these varrangs are defending, you should usually probably be pushing for that defensive modifier to hit back against the enemy real hard, and then once their dice are down and the enemy has applied their switches, the Northern Tribes player gets to decide how much damage they are willing to incur on themselves in order to exchange those blocks into successes and send more damage back the enemy, back to the enemy's face, and how much they want to block in order to preserve their high cost melee threat. So again, more decision points, more versatility, more absolute performance. Mwah, I just love it. The totem of the skin changers went through a couple of changes. Firstly, the main thing for me is that the polar bear totem no longer slows the skin changers down. The polar bear totem was by far the weaker one, because it only granted a single wound per model to the unit, and in exchange it essentially cost the scout ability as well as reducing the speed of the skin changers. But now you are only giving up on scouting, and for that you get those additional wounds, that additional durability. As pointed out by Alejandro and friends in the Discord, it would also seem that the timing of this ability has changed in the 1.6 version. Previously it was during deployment, now it seems to be before deployment, but this feels really off. This seems to suggest that there is a need to have this infinity type before the game hidden information dump that I really don't think suits what Warcrow is doing, and it feels not such an elegant way to go about it. I feel the old version was way more elegant, way more intuitive, and I would not be surprised if this is something that turns back into the good old way, where you essentially decide when you are about to deploy the skin changers which totem they will be using. This versatility is, or at least was, one of the main draws of the unit in the first place. The buffs don't stop even there, because the skin changers also got a point of conquest on their full profile, which again is not earth shattering, but it is real nice, and I'm going to be looking to play the heck out of these girls going forward. Oh, Alvard. Let's talk about the Ice Bear, a model and a character in the backstory that I really like, and his latest iteration on the gaming table. Just like Alborg, Alvard got a price reduction down to 40 points. In Alvard's case, this is even more drastic a reduction, since he used to cost whopping 60 points, which was unforgivably the most expensive model in the entire game. Unfortunately, unlike was the case with Alborg, Alvard actually has to pay for this reduced cost with a reduced performance, at least when it comes to his offensive output. Previously, it used to be that he had just a single offensive switch, a double special switch that allowed him to both impose the vulnerable state upon the target of the attack and also to inflict an automatic wound on them. Now these two components of the attack switch have been separated from one another, and the automatic wound has been locked behind a hollow success symbol. This actually ends up reducing the overall offensive performance of Alvard, because due to elite those hollow successes were in fact points of damage already, so this is just a way to sneak some automatic wounds through exceedingly high defense enemies, but it doesn't actually increase his average damage output, so this is quite unfortunate. A little bit of help was given to Alvard in that while he still can unfortunately only join skin changers, the limit on he being only able to join a polar bear unit of skin changers has been lifted. I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity. They kept the morale 3 on the attached profile instead of the +1 morale, which would in game terms have exactly the same effect with skin changers. But having a morale 3 attached version, joint version that could join, for example, orc hunters could be something cool and interesting, but alas, that's not the case here. Unfortunately, to be totally honest, I don't see a competitive reason to play Alvard even now, even with his massively reduced points cost and the slightly eased restrictions on his join. 40 points is just not worth it for this guy. Not the Merciless costs exactly the same and he got improved. If I was held at gunpoint, I would probably put Njord in my list before putting in the Ice Bear. And if you are so hell-bent on getting War Alliance, go ahead and get Alborg. He hits pretty much as hard as Alvard does. He brings War Alliance, but in addition he brings the Varg and the Crow, and he is capable of joining any infantry unit in the faction, so it's easier to keep him safe and or make him relevant for the rest of your company. Alvard may be a tad more tanky, but actually his defense role isn't all that good, and I have seen the Ice Bear get one-shotted off the field too many times to be a massive fan of even this iteration. Sky hinted in his last video that he's going to be talking about the profile changes soon too, and it sounds like he has some good things to say about the Ice Bear, but unfortunately I just don't see it. If you are absolutely the type of person who wants to run the Ice Bear, I guess now you no longer have a compelling reason not to do so, but unfortunately I just don't see a compelling reason to run him even now. So love the model, love the background. This helps, but this does not help enough, unfortunately. Alvard is still lacking, I feel, that something that makes him special, something that makes him stand out, something that makes him go, yeah, but I want to include him because of this. Maybe that's something we are going to see in the future, but as of right now, my Alvard model will be staying firmly where he's situated right now on my shelf, and unfortunately in that part where the dust piles are the highest. Okay, let's get to the Tundra Marauders next. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit surprised to see the Tundra Marauders buffed in the 1.6 update. I was already using these Varangs in most of my lists, and I feel that before the 1.6 update they were by far the strongest Varang non-character unit option out there, but at the same time I am really happy to see them improved, and that can only be a good thing for the northern tribes going forward. And there were a lot of people who didn't think that the Thunder Marauders were good enough in the northern tribes community also, so I guess this one's for them. When we get down to the details, the Tundra Marauders got an improved willpower in this latest update. They go from orange to a orange and a yellow, which means that they are essentially a little bit more likely or somewhat more likely to pass their willpower checks going forward. This also means that the value proposition of the characters when it comes to the willpower department has shifted somewhat, with the units that will be enforcing or implementing their own willpower on the unit, giving reduced value, and those units that add additional dice to the willpower of the Tantrum Marauders will provide even more value than before. Previously, there was no difference between attaching a unit that imposes red and a yellow and a unit that added a yellow dice on the Tantrum Marauders, but now there is actually a difference between these two. The offensive and defensive performance of the Tantrum Marauders also went through some changes. As you can see, the upgraded offensive and defensive roles are such that they will not on average provide that much more performance when compared to what you had previously, but the new dice sets, especially on the full power profile, do lend themselves to hitting big numbers more regularly. So the Tantrum Marauders are now, I feel, more dangerous both on the offensive and on the defensive from the opponent's point of view. While they are unreliable and they can be prone to rolling poorly and getting outfought as a result, I like this new dice pool that they have access to both on the attack and on the defense, because I feel it conveys these maybe a little bit undisciplined but at the same time dangerous warriors who when they roll hot on the gaming table can actually end up dealing quite a decent amount of damage and shrugging off a surprising amount of successes by the enemy. The switches of the Tantrum Marauders also got looked at. The attack profile got a innate single special switch on the full profile and a double special switch on the half profile, and this is entirely new. Previously, the Tantrum Marauders used to have no natural offensive switches. This new switch causes the slowed state, which isn't the most powerful switch out there, but hey, that's nice to have, and that's something to spend at least some of those special symbols on if you don't have a character who's going to lend their more powerful switch to the unit. On the defensive, the Tantrum Marauders kept their ability to displace if engaged, but this displace range got increased from 3 to 5, so there's that. I think the wording got also clarified a bit. If you're engaged, you get to displace 5, so potentially you can chain these displaces together if you get several. The new focus on more and better dice on the defense instead of the automatic block that was there previously on the full profile also makes triggering this switch more likely. Or come to think of it, it's actually the same amount of average triggers of this, but you have a higher ceiling value thanks to the more dice you are rolling. There, I finally got there. The one small nerf that the Tantrum Marauders got, you can also see inside the circle just present there. The half strength unit loses their point of conquest, but for all the upgrades that the unit got, this is a small price to pay, and I have absolutely no problems with this. The caltrops got also changed. There was always quite a dissonance between the backstory and the effect of the caltrops of old. The backstory paints this picture where the Tundra Marauders are extremely difficult to pursue, and they are especially dangerous against cavalry units due to their use of wicked caltrops. But in gaming terms, the caltrops actually got ignored by both the northern tribes and the hegemonic cavalry, and they had very limited use in most cases anyway. And being a command skill, they had something of an opportunity cost baked into them, so caltrops were actually pretty much a non-factor in most games. But with the latest update, caltrops have been turned into a passive skill that lasts for 3 turns after the Tundra Marauders have been deployed. And actually how a 3-turn timing works is that you place the token that signals the ending of this ability 3 steps ahead from the current one on the timer, which essentially means that the effect actually lasts for 4 turns total. And what the Caltrops passive effect does is that it causes it to be so that enemies cannot charge the Tundra Marauders, period. And that captures the feeling of a unit that's difficult to pursue. Now enemies will struggle with reduced threat range when trying to engage the Tundra Marauders, and they will be denied their charge attack rerolls, their raging bonuses, and whatever other things they might be looking to leverage when charging this unit for as long as the caltrops last. Remember that this is a timed ability after all. While the caltrops are in effect, the enemies engaging or being engaged by the Tundra Marauders also receive the slowed state, and if the enemy unit engaging or being engaged is a large or a cavalry unit, they also suffer a point of stress and the frightened state. These are some really cool and powerful effects, and I really love this. The Tundra Marauders are asking yet another nasty question of the enemy, besides being able to teleport and potentially hit them twice. And I really love how the new Tundra Marauders are feeling. I got to try them out, take them for a spin lately, and they felt exactly as good as advertised. So I highly recommend you all give your Tundra Marauders a try and see how you like them in this post 1.6 world. After a couple of entries that took a lot of time to explain, let's get to a way shorter one. To my eyes, Lotta stayed almost exactly the same, except that her solo command skill Crack the Whip now also essentially affects her. It used to be that when Lotta cracked her whip when solo, only other units would be getting the bonuses associated with this command skill, which always felt a bit weird for me, but now it's nice to see that Lotta is also whipping herself into a battle frenzy of sorts, so she can also enjoy the improved performance. This improved performance isn't that great after all, since she is naturally raging, so you essentially only get that single automatic success on attack and defense rolls, but hey, that's something, right? Speaking of units that got off lightly, Contender also got slight changes to her card. And these changes are essentially changes to the ranges of her abilities. The command skill Defiant Leader, yes, the one that allows you to push or shove rather, or attract the enemy unit and impose the vulnerable state upon them, got its range increased to 18 strides from 15, but unfortunately the conquest value increasing or commander skill passive skill got reduced from 15 strides to 12.
I'm not a massive fan of this change. I would have preferred to keep my 15th stride or commander, but I can see why it was considered to be necessary to tone down the aura effects range a bit. I'm not instantly feeling that Defiant Leader has gotten all that much better now that the range has been improved, but hey, I could be proved wrong. At least the ability got to keep the no loss effect from before.
Alright. Let's take a walk on the dark side, shall we? When I first read the changes to the Dark Master's card, I didn't take the time to go through every little bit that changed, and I was left feeling a little bit disappointed. But when I got around to rereading this card and figuring out to the best of my ability all the consequences of the changes presented here, I was more than happy with the end result. The Sharp Perception permanent ability has been changed in the most recent update. It used to be more or less a passive bubble around the Northern Tribes forces that were not engaged in melee combat with the enemy that said enemy scouts and ambushers don't come into this circle or you grant us a free move. But now the new Sharp Perception targets only a single Northern Tribes unit, but it can be any unit on the table and they get to perform a move when an enemy scout or an ambusher joins the fray after the battle has already commenced. And this feels like a great change to have on this passive. Now this passive really gives a lot more agency to the Northern Tribes player. It really reinforces the feeling that these are the apex hunters of Lindworm. Whoever thinks that they are hunting the Northern Tribes is actually gonna get hunted themselves. When an enemy deploys their scout or ambusher, you as the Northern Tribes player still get the chance to evacuate the most important asset nearby in order to deny enemy the most high value attack run that they could have done, at least in most cases. If there's an enemy ambusher looking to charge you, move back whatever they are trying to get to, or if there's a scout coming in trying to shoot you or something, move away from them, and that's that. But now there is also the option for you to ignore all this and go on the offensive instead. Instead of trying to reposition your units around the ambusher or the scout, select something entirely different in another part of the battlefield and shift them forward in order to put the pressure on the enemy. And this is something that I really like. Um, as our opponents learn to play against this new version of the Sharp Perception, they should become, I would suspect, quite mindful of deploying scouts and ambushers later in the game, because the opportunity cost for them is that extra movement that can be then used to extend the threat range of your unit, or for example get them close enough to capture a crucial objective on the next turn or whatever else you were planning for. So I really like this new version of Sharp Perception. Coded in Shadows got changed quite a bit. Firstly, for the solo version of the Dark Master, the Coded in Shadows no longer grants, or altogether the Coded in Shadows no longer causes the disarmed state upon the enemy attacking the Dark Master or their unit, but instead the solo Dark Master has a new passive called One with Darkness that causes this disarmed state. So the joined version lost the ability to enforce disarmed upon their enemies, but they got something in return. Coded in Shadows now simply states that enemies further than 7 strides away from the Dark Master or his unit, if he chooses to join a unit of Orc Hunters, cannot draw line of sight to the Dark Master / their unit from further than 7 strides away. And this is potentially extremely powerful an ability. Obviously, this will shut down shooting and all other types of ranged effects that the enemy could leverage to try and take out and or hinder Dark Master / their unit, as long as they originate further than 7 strides away. But this also essentially means that the Dark Master or the unit always have the upper hand when it comes to charging the enemy, because their charge threat range is essentially 12 strides, but no enemy can actually charge the Dark Master or the unit from further than 7 strides away. So that gives quite a powerful first strike ability on the Dark Master or the unit. It's not yet entirely clear how this ability interacts with scouting. If in a future FAQ it's said that the Coded in Shadows block line of sight ability works while deploying, that would then essentially mean that you are free to deploy the Dark Master's unit of scouts, scouting or hunters that is, within charge range of enemies when they come in, and this could be potentially quite powerful if they are deployed between end of the standard deployment phase and the start of the game, because this would allow them to potentially charge something on the first activation of the game. In the new version of the ambusher, the ambushers have to traditionally deploy at least 12 strides away or more than 12 strides away from enemies that can see them. So this means that Dark Master can potentially be unable to charge some enemies when he ambushes in solo, but if Coded in Shadows indeed were to cut the line of sight immediately when deploying and help the Dark Master deploy, this would also make it possible for him to get even closer to the enemy than was previously possible before choosing who to charge and engage. So I was getting a little bit stale on the Dark Master before, I'm not gonna lie, but now my commitment to this model is renewed and I'm looking forward to trying out him on the field. The next unit to go through some pretty major changes is the Prime Warrior, and obviously she was considered to be extremely strong by both the Northern Tribes community and the game's developers, because she got nerfed rather substantially. Firstly, the experience and rage, the command skill that grants extra actions or rather extra activations to orc units, has had its range reduced from 15 strides to 12. This is pretty much in line with the orc commander ability from the contender. This is unfortunate, since now the bubble of extra activation projection that the Prime Warrior is capable of displaying has been reduced in its size. The Fearsome Combatant ability also got reworked, and now it no longer makes the solo Prime Warrior immune to disarmed, vulnerable and slowed states. And this is something that I am sad to see go. I found my Prime Warrior to be a decent soft counter against things like the Warwick, because of the fact that she used to be immune to disarmed. But if Koruspelli feels that she was too powerful the way she was, I understand the decision to remove this part of the ability. This also brings it more in line with what you see on her joint profile. Speaking of which, the Fearsome Combatant and all the other buffs for that matter on the joint version got a pretty substantial rework.
In the new form, the Prime Warrior's only passive benefit that's always active on the unit she joins is a +1 of morale. She no longer provides any passive conquest modifier. She no longer adds any passive performance increase to her unit. Now all her upgrades in performance are locked behind a stress wall, so to speak. The new fearsome combatant on the Prime Warrior has both the stress for conquest and stress for extra range on the unit components left, but now it also grants a yellow dice on the attack roll of the unit in question for each point of stress on the unit. The hit or rather success and red dice on the offensive and the same on the defensive are now modifiers that you need to access through stress, and they are not automatic under any situation. It used to be that what we now see as the offensive modifier for the Prime Warrior was just a passive bonus, and the automatic success from the defensive modifier used to be an automatic part of her profile improvement too. These join profile changes I feel are quite some nerfs. The Prime Warrior now fails to deliver any value beyond that +1 morale if your unit isn't stressed, and the fact that you are now only ever able to provide +3 conquest tops if you are in a morale 3 unit, that is, means that you are no longer capable of getting your conquest 5 conquest 5 battle scarred, which is too bad. This, in conjunction with the weakening of some of her solo abilities, means that I, for one, am going to be way less likely to reach for my Prime Warrior going forward. I'm not saying she's unplayable by any stretch of the imagination, but let's just say that she has been brought a lot more in line with the rest of the faction. I would have liked to see maybe some small buff to the joint profile, maybe giving that orange and yellow willpower to the unit that she joins to, or maybe give an additional yellow dice on willpower or something, so that she would be a little bit more enticing, but hey, this is what we've got right now. When it comes to surprising changes in the 1.6, the Ice Archers are definitely one of those. These Varrank ranged combatants got their movement value reduced from 4-3 with a 10 strike charge to a 4-2 and a 10 strike charge. This kinda makes sense because Hersir has maintained his 4-2 movement from the very beginning, being the only Varrank unit with a 4-2 movement, but now it makes sense. The Hersir used to be an Ice Archer back in the day, and the Ice Archers seem to be strolling about a bit more with a bit more of a leisurely pace when compared to your Tundra Marauders and your Skin Changers, so there's apparently that. The unit also got its ranged attacks range reduced from 15 to 12, and these two changes combine to reduce the effective threat range of the Ice Archer unit by a total of 4 strides during their activation. I understand that some people were considering Ice Archers to be already quite valuable and extra activation to leverage with the Vark and the Crow, and the Vark and the Crow being a full activation might have seemed to some to necessitate nerfing the Ice Archers threat range. But at the same time, I for one haven't been playing the Ice Archers a whole heck of a lot of late. I feel they are quite unreliable when it comes to their willpower performance, and they really do need Celica in them for them to be worthy of the points you are spending on them. And this reduced threat range makes me even less likely to pick them. And this all is compounded by the fact that, as we are about to see, solo Celica got better, while the attached or joined rather Celica got only slightly cheaper. Next up on the list of models that went through changes of note is Escolt the Executioner. Scythe of the Executioner command skill has been buffed by making it easier to trigger. It used to be that you could only trigger Scythe of the Executioner when Escolt's unit or Escolt by himself was engaging an enemy unit or got engaged by an enemy unit. But now this command skill is triggerable every time the unit attacks, which means that you can proc this ability during a prolonged melee combat, and when Thunder Marauders are concerned, you can even proc it twice per activation. This is one of the ways that the Warc Riders got improved, even though the Warc Riders themselves didn't get any updates of note. The Warc Riders also get more value out of Escolt than before due to the fact that supports in 1.6 do count as members of their unit, so you no longer have to choose between going to half strength after 4 wounds or losing Escolt. Now you will just every time remove one of the 2 Warc Riders as the first casualty, which means that the first 7 wounds that your Warc Riders suffer will not impair the unit's performance in the slightest. The Warc Riders also benefit from the fact that they seem like a great recipient to the new and improved altered version of the Spirit of the Thermopleurus, especially when Escolt is joining there. If you have Escolt and his puppy buddies with fully loaded up Spirit of the T on them, you can be charging an enemy unit, forcing Frightened on them via your charge. Then you are causing them to suffer the effects of intimidating, potentially putting stress on them. Then you can trigger Scythe of the Executioner to hit them and stress them from losing the combat, stress them from Scythe of the Executioner. Then you are dealing automatic wounds to them because they are now hopefully overstressed, and then the enemy is frightened and will potentially break from you. So that sounds like a quite a scary combination, even though the Warc Riders themselves didn't get any buffs per se. Our silent but deadly type Archer in Celica went through quite some changes in 1.6. Firstly, as you can see, Celica got a tad more affordable by her points cost being reduced from 30 to 25. The leader of the Ice Archer's ability has also been removed, and it's been replaced by the fact that Celica is simply an officer. I don't think you will ever join Celica to any unit other than the Ice Archers, so I don't think there is any controversy in making her an officer. Cool, yeah, she could theoretically be your company's leader if you absolutely want to, but I don't see us doing that either, so I don't think this is a problem in any shape or form. Celica's attack went through a little bit of a reworking. She maintains basically the same attack dice and the same range and the same switches, but now you no longer need to first apply slowed in order to get access to the automatic wounds from the hollow successes. Now the automatic wound switch is always enabled, which is not a big deal. Celica was pretty much always slowing her targets anyway, but now you will not have to sweat one bit. Just go fishing for those hollow successes and see how far you can get. Speaking of fishing for those hollow successes, you get to do something of a more of a fishing trip, at least when your primary target is concerned. It used to be that the Bow of Claws was a long action combat skill that would target a main unit and then two secondary units with weaker triple yellow dice attacks. Now this ability has been simplified. You only ever attack a single target, even though you do get to also slow down two targets next to it. But the big thing that Bow of Claws has been turned into a short combat skill. And this means that Celica can actually ambush in, trigger Bow of Claws to attack something with her bow and slow it down along with two of its nearby friends, and then you get to shoot again using your standard ranged attack. And this is something that I really like. Celica's ranged damage output isn't all that sky high, and it's really not reliable, but it can be dangerous against units that don't want to get hit by automatic wounds. And the fact that you get to roll that attack twice on the turn you come in can be quite scary for some opponents. You also get to leverage the area of effect slow against as many as 4 units if you so choose. If you first use Bow of Claws to slow down 3 units and then shoot at another. And in the best case scenario, you are ambushing Celica in to capture an objective, and then you get to do all these shooty things beyond that. So that's something that's really nice to see. With all these improvements on the Celica's solo profile and no upgrades on her joint profile, I am a bit surprised to see no improved willpower on the ice archers that she joins even now. All in all, these things seem to suggest to me that we are going to be seeing Celica more fighting solo going forward, and I'm next planning on trying her out in the next variation of my Aalborg list. Speaking of varangs that like body ink, let's talk about the Tattooist next. As you can see, the Tattooist's ranged attack range got reduced from 15 to 12, which now means that she cannot scout in and immediately perform a ranged attack. This isn't going to be that big of a deal. Her ranged attack profile is so weak that you usually didn't want to try and assassinate anything of importance with her anyway, but now that option has been entirely taken away from us. That's not something to cry over, however, because of the major change and major buff that the hallucinogenic mushrooms got. This ability stayed a permanent passive, but its effect was entirely reworked because the old version had next to no effect in the 1.5.2 world. Now what the hallucinogenic mushrooms does is that it grants the spellcasters in the Northern Tribes list, usually that's going to be the evoker, period, rerolls on any dice of their choice when they are performing tinge checks or spell block rolls. But the cost of tripping on the shrooms is that all the hollow symbols that the spellcaster rolls will inflict tinge on them when performing these roles. And this is something of a thing that I have said a lot during this video, but I really like this change. Now there is most certainly a potential downside for eating your magic mushrooms, but at the same time your evoker is going to be the most capable spell blocker in the game because of her ability to fish for those shields, those blocks with her rerolls, and she might even be able to avoid some tinge thanks to the reroll effect on either the block roll or the tinge roll. But at the same time, there are going to be more die phases that will end up giving you tinge, so there is cost to using this ability. The joint profiles buffs have been now divided into two different passive skills, the healing tattoos and the whale needle, but the effects have remained essentially the same. The last unit to go through changes of note, from at least what I can see, Sky will probably point out in his video all the stuff that I missed, is the rock troll. The slumber passive got reworked. It no longer causes the destroyed rock troll to be replaced by a 5-stride diameter piece of terrain, but rather now you will simply leave the model of the dead rock troll on the table, and the model will henceforth be an unstable piece of rugged terrain, which essentially means that moving through the rock troll's quote-unquote corpse will cause the slowed state, it will stop charges, and you cannot end your movement on the creature's fallen body. And when the rock troll gets brought back into the game via Raise the Rock spell granted to the evoker, then you will simply start using the model as a rock troll again, and the terrain effect ends. This makes it less cumbersome to play the rock troll, and it makes it so that you won't be blocking or inducing slow on such a large footprint on the gaming table. And this also nicely and most importantly gets around the fact that the rock troll does not have the preferred terrain rugged keyword, which meant in the old version that the rock troll could get slowed by the terrain that was used to respawn its own body essentially. But now if you are resurrecting your rock troll from the rubble of its corpse, then there should be no such problem, and your troll will come back into life, capable of immediately going after your enemies at the breakneck speed that is 2-2 and an 8-stride charge. Yes, I know the big base, but still. The shove switch of the rock troll also got changed from a hollow success into a hollow special. This isn't a huge change, but it does help trigger this ability somewhat. Previously, you used to have about a 56% chance of triggering the shove switch. Now that ability triggers, or that switch triggers, about 63% of the time. So that's better obviously, but not a huge difference, especially when you can only ever trigger this ability once, because you have to be engaged with the enemy in order to trigger this switch, and the enemy, if you shove them away, will no longer be engaged with you in most instances. I'm looking forward to seeing a situation where you can push the enemy against the wall or something and cause automatic wounds against them over and over again, but that's not in the game at the moment. We'll see if that type of terrain or special rule comes into effect at some point. And there we have it, the most important changes to the Northern Tribes factions profiles brought about by the Warcrow 1.6 update. I'm sorry it took me this long to get this video out, but as you can see, the work was quite a substantial effort. Now let's get raiding, everyone. Let's test out the changes, share our best experiences, and let's make the soft Southerners afraid of the Northern Tribes once more. Hope to see you soon with some battle report content, and have a great day, fellow travelers.